you move forward politically without the Democrats hijacking this movement. Well,
and move on.
The way to do that is to continue to do exactly what you are doing. Continue to spread the word. You see, there are a lot of lies out there right now. One of the biggest lies, for example, is that corporations need tax cuts in order to create jobs. I mean, really, seriously, that's what's being said. Corporations need tax cuts in order to create jobs. Well, the fact of the matter is, corporations are sitting on $2 trillion worth of cash right now. And they also, the ratio of corporate profits to wages is higher than it's been since before the Great Depression. Corporations do not need extra cash or regulatory relief or tax cuts to create jobs.
No.
The other big lie out there I keep hearing is trickle-down economics. Well, you say boo, but you know, it's like a big lie. The big lie, the secrets of the big lie is if you tell it over and over and over again, people start to believe it. And that's why this movement and all of you have got to rebut the big lie. You've got to say, no, trickle-down economics is a fraud. You cut taxes on the very wealthy, and nothing trickles down. In fact, after George W. Bush cut taxes on the very wealthy, what happened? The median wage started to drop in this country. People started to lose jobs. Yes?
Doesn't the system of capitalism and the so-called free market encourage, incentivize greed?
Question is, doesn't our system, our economic system, encourage greed? Well, it doesn't always, and it doesn't have to. If you take the greed out of Wall Street, you're left with pavement. But that doesn't mean everybody. I mean, you know, your friends, my friends, people who have small shops, people who are doing things in collectives, people who are trying to work hard and be good citizens and pay for their family. They're not doing it out of greed. They're doing it because they need to, or because some people actually like what they do. So it doesn't absolutely have to be greed. In fact, what we need to do is create an economy that is based on morality.
Yes.
An economy in which we are not working for the economy is working for us.
Yes.
That's what can be created.
Keep the megaphone up to your...
Keep the megaphone up, yeah.
You were part of the Clinton administration, and Bill Clinton cut Glass-Steagall. Do you know why that was done since you were there?
The question was why in the Clinton administration did, in 1999, they get rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. I left in 1997, and I don't know. I was opposed to that. In fact, I think it was a terrible decision. Yes.
Similar to how Gandhi kicked out the British.
I'm sorry?
Similar to how Gandhi was able to kick out the British. He begged the people in India to go on civil disobedience, not go to work, not even leave the house. That idea of not showing up for work, everybody around the world coming together and saying we're not going to feed them shit, as well as not buy anything that one day.
Yeah. Let me repeat what was just said because I think it's a very important thing. One way in which this movement can show its strength is to organize a national strike.
Internet.
Which is basically a strike against buying anything.
Yeah. And not leaving the house. Yeah.
And maybe not even leaving the house, but it's basically as a strike. It's a non-violent, passive disobedience. It says we are not going to, for one day, we're just going to show our strength for one day, and let's see what happens if nobody participates for this one day.
Well, how can we get that to happen?
Well, let's spread the word. And by the way, that brings up one other point. It is critically important, and I can see some of you, you're my age, you remember the civil rights struggle, and you remember the struggle against Vietnam. What is very important to remember is you need discipline, you need patience, and you need nonviolence.
Yeah.
And for those who are outside critics who say, well, what do you stand for and what are your demands? You tell them, be patient. Because like the civil rights movement and like every other major movement in history, those demands percolate. We know what we are about broadly. We know we want a more just society. We know things have got completely skewed and out of whack. But specifically what we want or what you want, that will happen. That's coming. We don't want just a list of demands. Yes.
You say we need to save the system. Considering how partisan our politics are right now and how lobbyists are so influential in politics, and our democratic process system right now support that to achieve, reform.
Well, you're asking, can the democratic process that is completely paralyzed, with one party, basically Republicans, saying no to anything that the Democrats come up with, and some Democrats almost as bad as the Republicans, how can we change fundamentally politics? The only way politics in this country changes over time is from the grassroots. The only way Washington changes is if people outside Washington make so much of a ruckus, non-violently, but enough of a ruckus that Washington can't help but pay attention. Okay, I am being asked to put this up in the air, so you can hear me.
You have had your lips almost very close.
And I
The whole city here.
Okay, I'll make sure that all of San Francisco hears. Yes.
Can you comment on the relationship between the billions and trillions of dollars we're spending on occupations in the Middle East and Afghanistan and the economic situation we find ourselves in?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the question is, what about this extraordinary, the doubling of defense spending after 9/11? And what is that being done to the economy? Well, I'll tell you what it means is we don't have the money for schools. We don't have the money to fix our roads and bridges and public transportation. We don't have the money for health care. We can't do what we need to do in this country. And if I were asked, what would one of my planks be in terms of change, I'd say at least half the defense budget. Yes, sir.
Can you comment on everyone pulling their money out of the big banks for receiving bailout money and sticking it in their local credit unions?
One other idea here is take your money out of the big banks and put it in your local credit union. I like that.
Would it be a significant help if capital gains were taxed the same as income?
Another question or an idea is let's make sure that capital gains are taxed the same as income, as ordinary income is taxed. Now, some of you that may not mean very much, but what it really means is you've got some extraordinarily rich people. They are taxed at a rate of 15%, which is the capital gains rate, because they have managed to make most of their income look as though it's capital gains, and that's just not fair. And that's when Warren Buffett talks about his secretary being taxed at a lower rate than he's taxed. That's what he's talking about. Many of these themes come back to the same fundamental issue of fairness. They come back to the same fundamental issue of we are all in this together. And that is the choice. In other words, do you agree we're just a bunch of individuals? We're on our own? It's kind of survival of the fittest. That's one political philosophy. Social Darwinism. The other political philosophy is, and I think you all agree, we are all in it together. And we care about each other. And we have a society, and that meaning of that society is people take responsibility for each other.
With the multinational corporations and the rich having us watch the Democrats and the Republicans like that's the main target while they rape and pillage our country, how do you see a solution to that to get it back on track besides the grassroots movement?
What do you do about the multinational corporations, the giant global corporations that basically can go anywhere, do anything they want? They are beyond national boundaries. Well, here's the good news. Every one of those global companies depends to a large extent on the American market. And that means that if we actually ever had control over politics, if we ever actually got the government back for the people, as we must, and we really don't have any choice, for our children and our grandchildren, if we did that, we could put some standards on those global corporations. If you want to do business here in the United States, you've got to do X, Y, and Z.
But their market base has expanded globally. They don't need the United States as much as they did before.
Well, they may not need the United States as much as they did before, but they need the United States. We're still the world's #1 market.
What happened to the antitrust laws?
Question. These are great questions. What happened to the antitrust laws? Well, one of the things that happened to the antitrust laws, same things that happened to the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Regulation.
No, deregulation, but also these agencies are not being funded enough to have enough inspectors, enough enforcers, enough attorneys, enough people who are actually there. In other words, one way of repealing the antitrust laws or repealing the securities laws is just to underfund the agencies, and that's what they're doing.
But I think Reagan started not enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act. Isn't that correct?
Ronald Reagan was the progenitor. He was one of the originators of not enforcing the antitrust laws. Absolutely. Because under their view, you don't really have to worry about size as long as there's economic efficiency. Well, I'll tell you something. If we've learned anything over the last 4 years, when you're talking about the big banks on Wall Street, or you're talking about BP and the oil spill, or you're talking about Massey Energy and that mine cave-in that killed miners, or you're talking about the big insurance companies in America, if there's anything we've learned is that with size comes political power, and with political power comes unaccountability.
And we need regulation.
And we need regulation. Of course we need regulation.